Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Evan, writer of Lani Comics. We are here to talk about said comic and get to know Evan a little bit more. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's good to be here.
All right, as we ask every creator when they come on, of all the choices you could have made in this world, some of the most profitable, why comic books like the rest of us?
Oh, man. How much time do we have? So,
well, we got quite a bit.
Basically, when I was young, I got into comics, and then, of course, got into a lot of the shows. And I grew up in the '90s, so we're talking about X-Men the animated series, Spider-Man the animated series. I mean, Batman the animated series was by far my favorite. And got into a lot of reading a lot of comics around, Wolverine was one of my favorites at that time. And then, I got separated from it for quite a bit. And then, more recently, I would say, I started getting really into the MCU. I mean, who didn't, right? Yeah. And then the Nolan trilogy, and really into things like the Netflix series of Daredevil, and really kind of fell in love with, from those series, the street level crime aspect of comics, and then started reading again, and primarily the Chip Zdarsky's run of Daredevil, now Batman. I mean, those are probably a couple of my favorites right there. And realized, for a long time I wanted to write something and felt like I had a story to tell, but I've always kind of been nervous to do so. Primarily because, who wouldn't be, right? You're writing something, you're kind of putting yourself out there and seeing what kind of feedback you're going to get. And then just decided I have a story to tell. So I went ahead and wrote it, and I'm now self-published 4 books, and I'm working on my 5th.
That's awesome. Now, growing up, did you kind of always have a kind of a penchant for writing, or was it something you developed maybe later on after getting into comics?
I think it was later on, more so than anything. I always had an interest in writing, but never really kind of explored that until I started really digging into the comic and outlining what I wanted, and realizing I had something there that I could kind of fill those gaps in the outline with, and just basically wrote something I want to read. And that's really what I tell everyone that asks.
Yeah, no, I think that's always the best advice. I think everyone that comes up to your booth and always asks you, what's the secret? They really hate when you tell them, just keep working, put out something you want to read. They're like, no, what's really that? That is the secret. I assure you, that is how it's done.
Absolutely.
Now, what's really amazing, and this could just be me, especially working in a hospital, as soon as I read the first bubble, and I saw the words Lolo G, I knew exactly that this had to have Filipino reference, because that's the only place that you would know your Lolo, your Lola, your Ati, and Kuyas. So where did that come from? Was that just, is that part of your nationality? Do you know, are you married to someone that's Filipino, or is it just, how did that get into the comic book?
I love that you know that. I think that's so great.
Yeah.
So my wife is Filipino. She grew up in the Philippines, and then came out here, a long time ago after high school. And our daughter is mixed race. I basically have been part of her family now for almost 2 decades, and it's just been very influential in kind of who I am as a person, and just my values, and I've always been very inspired by the culture, and just how close, from a family perspective, that particular culture is. So I wanted to kind of pay tribute as an ally, and throw something in there, and also have the main protagonist be a young woman, kind of like my daughter. My daughter's middle name is Lani, so it just kind of all fell into place that way.
Yeah, no, that was awesome to me. And the Philippines, I feel like you have a lot more artists and writers coming out of the Philippines. That we had Don Aguilo on the show, who's an amazing artist. He's done amazing cover work. And I think it's great to spotlight, because, like I said, there's so many great comic book people in the Philippines. And I feel like it's on the rise for that art style. So
Absolutely.
really happy to see.
Yeah, just to kind of double click on that too is, I was really surprised just how many like indie books out there that have Filipino or the Philippines in terms of a reference. There's just a really interesting culture, and they all kind of support each other, and they were very supportive of me when I met them. So it's been just a really positive experience.
Yeah. Now, what is interesting about the book too, and I could see it now with your kind of your interest in the shows, was keeping this, at least in the first issue, especially kind of street level, more modern, which is nice, because I think sometimes we get so overwhelmed with Azad or someone that everyone falls into a chemical vat. OSHA does not exist in the comic book world. It's easy. I think that's what made Netflix Daredevil and Luke Cage so easy to watch. There was just enough mysticism to keep you hooked, but it was modern enough that you could stay with it.
Yeah, I mean, again, the street level crime piece, whether it be Batman, whether it be Daredevil, Elektra, you can go down the list. They've always been just very interesting to me, and particularly the Netflix series and Daredevil and Jessica Jones were probably my two favorites. There was just a real realness about it, right?
Yeah.
There's a grit about it. There's a lot of raw emotion, and you could really like tap into the characters versus trying to like try to loop in so many characters and attributes. I mean, not to say I don't love the stuff that the MCU does around space and the multiverse, but at the same time, like it's not my preference for writing. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it adds up in that first issue, even as we see Puppet Master, and we don't know much about him, but we've seen, I mean, it seems like he's just a normal drug dealer who's just trying to own the world. Does it make it easier not having like so many, I guess, super powered people that you could really get into a deeper character profile than just writing out, well, we don't have to worry about that he's weak to this because he throws fireballs?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, yeah, the Puppet Master is just basically like your king of the underworld. Just doing all kind. It's based in San Diego, where I live, and there's just a lot of opportunity there to touch on the trafficking and the drug business in the underworld and things like that. So it just felt really kind of real there. I do, as the books kind of progress, there is the introduction of some additional characters, but I try to keep it to similar theme where there is some mysticism about it historically, but at the same time, I mean, you see what you get, right? I mean, the Puppet Master, super strong dude, really just terrible human being. And then Lani, who has this just strength about her but also this like anger from the murder of her Lolo G that raised her. And that anger, I feel like, really comes out as the books keep going.
Definitely. Now, is this for you making this book? Was this kind of like a first big project for you? Is this something you've been building up to?
Yeah, it's my first big project. It's actually my first project.
Okay.
And it's been something I've been thinking about for a while. And just kind of just penciling it out in terms of like what would it look like if I wrote one book and just do one, and then when I finished the one, I was like, I really want to do another one. So how do I end the first one, and then just kind of continuing out this long outline of just like, who do I want to introduce, like how do I want to end these things. And I'll be honest, like a lot of it to me is like a puzzle, right? So you can start with the edges, you can start with the middle, and eventually it all kind of comes together and forms. But at the same time, sometimes I'll be writing like, and I'll be like, I'm in book two. I'm like, man, I really wish I wrote that in book one. How can I introduce it in book two? Things like that.
Yeah. And I think that's what's really nice. Even though this is your first project, is you left yourself with such a big world just in that first issue. Because I mean, obviously we all know a city can get cleaned up. There's multiple cities, especially if you're in the United States. Obviously we referenced the Philippines. You could always go back to the Philippines. You mentioned that her Lolo G was part of a bigger group. Does she meet the rest of this group? I mean, you've really set yourself up for a world building. I don't know if that's something that I'm assuming was definitely intentional, especially for either continuing the main story or doing a spinoff. But it seems like that's the plan.
Yeah, great call out. I mean, I think the idea was to like keep it kind of open ended to see what I could do with it if I chose to. I think I mentioned to you I don't do Kickstarters or any of that stuff. So it's really a matter of like I also it's a matter of like, you know, do I have the time and do I have the funding to kind of continue the next book, but at the same time don't limit myself to that current book. In terms of like spin-offs and stuff, it's actually really interesting you mentioned that. I'm working on book 5 right now, and in book 5 I'm trying to keep the same like tone of the first like 20 to 25 pages of Lani, but then I'm actually doing an origin, like a dozen pages of an origin of another of the characters that you meet throughout the story. So it doesn't mean it'll be a spin-off. It's just like, who really is this person? You know, I see them in this book now, like, tell me more. So
yeah, no, I think that's excellent. Now being that this is your first project, and you're getting your feet wet and you've obviously got a pretty good outline. I mean, you're already working pretty far in advance, which is great. I think that's always the way to go. Because if something is successful, I feel like sometimes indie creators, they make one issue, see if they can get the funds, and then they have no backing for their second one. And now you're making your fans wait for the second one. And where if you work a little bit ahead, you kind of have the pace to start with it, which is great. So I mean, how far do you think you would want to take kind of this first run of it?
You know, I don't know. You know, when I first started, I actually thought about, do I want to make a graphic?
Yeah.
And then for at that point, it was just like a funding thing, right? I wanted to get a book out there, and I figured, okay, let's split it up into a run. And I feel like this first run, you know, of kind of the Light and the Dark series of what it is right now, it'll probably be no more than 8 issues. And then at that point, you know, it'll either be a spinoff, or I'll take a break, or you know, or start another run with Lani and see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Now, as we talked before, in that this does have a heavy Filipino base, and there are so many Filipino authors. Have you thought, or even writers, have you thought about having kind of multiple variant covers?
Yeah, I have. And really that's also a matter of funding too, because when you have the variant covers, how many of each one do you print, you know? And I do signings out here in San Diego at local comic shops, so it's printing is an extra cost, and I just thought for now I'll do single covers for the issues at this point.
Definitely. So obviously you got a lot of things kind of behind you. You've really stepped into the role. Where in the next few kind of months to years would you like to see kind of yourself grow and the comic book grow?
Yeah. So I'm actually going to be have a booth at my first convention, which is going to be San Diego Comic Fest. So it's like
Awesome.
a more local convention out here in San Diego. So I'm really excited about that, and kind of see what kind of attention it gets there. I think in the next year, it's just kind of taking it one book at a time. And you know, the way I kind of explain it to friends and other, you know, people that ask me is, this was a hobby first, and you know, if it becomes something more lucrative, that's wonderful, because I love doing it. But in the end, I'll feel like I'm still successful because it was a hobby that I was able to accomplish.
Definitely. I think for everyone, getting that first, every Indian creator especially, getting that first issue back from printing and just seeing your name on a front cover or even on that flip of the front cover is probably a feeling that I don't know if most people will ever get the chance to know.
Yeah. I mean, the joy of getting that first run of prints, it was just like, it was just so amazing to me that I was able to accomplish it. I actually have a family who is a pretty strong readers of Lani, and I mean that they vary in age from like 8 to the mid 40s, and they all like the book in their own way. And um, giving them that first copy and watching them just enjoy it and immerse themselves and be like, well, when am I getting the second one? You're just like, like I'm just starting it. And but getting that first set of prints in the mail and just opening it up and just seeing your vision is just so outstanding.
Definitely. And for everyone listening that is an indie creator that has been on our show or is just looking, is there anything you've learned in this process of kind of undertaking this that it's maybe something you wish you had known ahead of time or that someone maybe had told you that you think could be helpful for other creators?
So one thing I wish I would have done is go to a convention and talk to a bunch of indie creators before or even during the process, rather than I already had the first 2 books out when I went to like LA Comic-Con and shared a lot of my books with various indie creators. And I wish I would have just asked them that question ahead of time. So I do highly recommend, if you're thinking about writing something or you're starting to write something, before you work through the art, the inking, the lettering, maybe bring a few sample pages to like a convention and just showing some of these indie creators like what you got, and then listen to what their lessons learned are. That's probably one of my biggest ones. The other one I would say is it took me a while to find my first artist, and I actually am working with now my 3rd artist for books 3, 4, and 5, and that differentiation in the art is pretty sweet in some places, but at the same time, it's like this artist that I'm working with now just really tells the story the way I want, and I wish I would have taken just a little bit more time in trying that out.
Yeah, no, those are both great points, especially asking people for help. I think a lot of indie creators get nervous that if they ask other indie creators that they think that you're trying to somehow like poach talent or you're trying to get like the one up. That's not true. Indie creators know exactly how hard this industry is when you're not Marvel, DC, or Boom, and you're really just trying to tell a story. You're not like, if you make profit, it's great, but for the most part, you guys are all doing this for the love of the story. Almost always they're willing to at least share some insight or point you in the right direction of what can help. Now, as far as your artists go, that is another one. I think, again, it's another thing where I think people almost get nervous to ask for a sample, or they're afraid to be like, well, this guy spent a week drawing my one page and I really don't want to hurt his feelings and he's really excited about it. Maybe I should just do it. Like, you are, I mean, that it's your book at the end of the day. You are hiring this person, and obviously it's their art, but it has to be a cohesive thing, and you can't be afraid to speak up for your project, especially if it's just not what you envisioned. And that's a hard one to learn. I mean, that's something with experience, definitely.
Yeah, and art is also pretty expensive.
Yep.
Right. And when you're not 3rd-party funded and you're trying to work through artists and just getting someone to really just draw Lani the way you envisioned her to look like, that takes time and it takes money. So and then finding someone that you can work with to where, you put together some requirements. I mean, I work through Fiverr for my art.
Yep.
I don't have an artist that I work with and I do cons with or anything like that. I have an artist on Fiverr. I send her my requirements for every job, and she just does an amazing job with it. So,
yeah, no, that's awesome. Which brings us to the point of why we're here, and that is to discuss Lani. For everyone listening, if this was a convention and you had to give the pitch, what your comic book is about, how would you sum it up?
Yeah. So Lani, I think it's a book about culture. It's a book about emotion. And it's a real story. It's a story that I think everyone can relate to in some way, whether you're part of the Filipino culture or not. And it's really about a girl who grows up to be who has to grow up fast, and basically she grows up with a lot of grief, a lot of loss. And as she's growing up, her grandfather was part of this ancient organization in the Philippines called Ilao, or the Light. And the job of Alao is to basically station Master Alao all over the world in different cities to fight against the dark, or Dilim. And Lani is part of that, heritage. And her parents were killed when she was born in a car accident, just shortly after she was born. She survived, and her grandfather Lolo G raised her. Lolo G, when she was about 17 years old, got murdered by this just awful human being called the Puppet Master in San Diego. And since then, she's had to take the reins of being the Master Alao in San Diego and surrounding areas, and not only protect the city, but also just keep this like itch of investigating the murder of her grandfather, because she doesn't know it's the Puppet Master at the time. So that's what I say. That's kind of how I share the story with people. And then from there, it just kind of takes off into just a lot of action, just a lot of twists and turns and things like that.
Definitely. And the action was very fantastic. Now, obviously, you worked on the story for a while before we got to this first issue. Did you make a lot of changes as you were going through this, or has this kind of always been the original kind of plot with villain and side story?
The Puppet Master was always the villain I really wanted to use. It's like this, just this like dude in a yellow suit, this big guy, wears a mask. We don't know why he wears a mask. Carries a couple of handguns and just is in charge of this large group of just mercenaries that work for him throughout the city, and just controls everything, which is kind of like, pulling the strings, and just that whole concept of leveraging strings in the titles. Lani was always a character I wanted to write about, and particularly because my wife is just a really, really strong human being. My daughter is growing up to be, she's almost 17 now, and she's a really, really strong human being, and she's right around the age where Lani was when she was continuing her training, but then lost her grandfather, things like that. So I think it was always just an inspiration to me to write about strong, strong women in a Filipino heritage, and that was special to me. So Lani was always a character. The Puppet Master was always a character. Everyone else around them just kind of came along.
Kind of blended in.
Yeah.
Now, what I do wonder, and this is just from me reading a lot of comic books. This could be easier or harder depending on how you look at it. It's always good to have the mentor character in every comic book. We can all look back. There's always a mentor. Sometimes where you least expect it, but there is always someone. But when they're currently involved, I feel like sometimes people put mentors in a story and they put them in like a weird panel just to say like, oh, nope, see, he's still here. He's still working. I mean, I hate to say don't, kill off a character. It's good for you. But the nice thing with killing off the mentor early on, I feel like getting the flashbacks and the lessons learned not only helps you fill in panels and pages if you kind of need that break between action, but it almost feels more meaningful when you do that flashback panel. I don't know if that was your intention or if that did help somewhere in the story, but that's how I felt about it.
Yeah, and I continue that throughout the books. I mean, spoiler, I continue that throughout the books, and there's a reason for it. One, like, we don't really know who Lolo G is, right?
Yeah.
Like, we just know her grandfather was murdered, and he trained her for so long, and so it's really good for just to see him kind of instilling his wisdom to her, and just sharing that the tradition and the culture and also the skills, and so keeping the mentor in there without the mentor kind of taking over any of the pages, I think, is valuable. But also just showing this real pure relationship that they had, I think, is pretty special as well.
Definitely. And that was probably the first character when I went through this the first time reading that issue. Is like, man, the origin story. If you ever did a 4-part Lolo G origin story, is going to be pretty awesome, because you don't really understand when she says the word night job until you get halfway kind of into the issue what the night job is. And again, having been at the hospital and having someone there called Lolo Steve, it's hard to picture that word and like the night job. So now it's always curious of like, how did they interact when they were on this job? Which I think is going to be great. It may be something you're working on, maybe not. We'll keep everyone just stay on the lookout for it. But I think that is also, you set yourself up real well.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. What is also kind of enduring about this comic book that adds maybe from the first issue. Now, obviously, you do have different artists kind of working, but I'm assuming the general theme is the way the artwork is done. As I tell everyone, you can go to Marvel and DC and you're going to get bold lines, bold colors, almost really fleshed out kind of there. This issue it's more, you can see what you're getting, but it's almost kind of, I wouldn't say watercolor-esque, but there is almost like an ink flow to it, which I think does help the action and kind of the way it highlights like her acrobatic and her thief skills. I don't know if this was the intended art style or maybe something you just got inspired by, or the artist kind of showed you like, oh, I think we should go this way.
Yeah, the artist is a student down in Argentina, and she was one of the artists I wanted to try out and just get a sample from, and I just found her artwork to be like super special in that it's just different. And I don't know, for those folks who've read the latest kind of Avengers Twilight series, there's like this really kind of just interesting artwork to it that you can't quite describe. But the watercolor description is really nice. The way I would describe book 2 is it does have more of that like gritty, dark Batman the animated series aspect to it, which is kind of hard to believe if you read book 1. And then when I'm going through books 3, 4, and now 5, it does have your more traditional comic book feel to it, and I think I really found kind of the story I'm trying to tell through that. But book 1 was just a fun project because I never expected the art to be like that until she showed me the sample, and then we saw that connection for how I wanted to introduce kind of the raw emotion to the story.
Yeah, no, I think it adds up too, because in your story you're essentially telling a story of light versus dark. I mean, that's the whole premise of it. And I always wondered, like, oh, do we have dark colors? And this is a dark story because as we get to like the last issue or where she's resolved it, do we kind of see like the dark colors and the dark artwork go away, and we see kind of almost like bright colors? And like, I know the Filipino sun is a huge thing, and like seeing it rise and like she could finally move past the trauma that got to her. Again, that might not be what you're going for, but I think that's the contrast to it, and just like the story you're telling. The colors definitely add to the story.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the idea. I like the illustration at the end of the story. That I won't spoil it for other people, but it definitely shows kind of like the gist of it, that there will be light eventually.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of like, how long will it take to get there, and how much pain must I endure to get there. And that's kind of been the premise of it. The thing is though too is like, Ryan, is as I'm writing these issues, I always think of kind of like another twist and turn that I want to make with it, to where it just feels like I know I want to get to this end. I know what this end is going to be, but then there's just so much story to tell as you start writing the previous issue. So it just takes you like another book to get there. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the tough part, especially with series that are similar to these, almost where it's part revenge are kind of in the first half, and then we kind of spend the second half into the redemption arc already. and you kind of look through, you're like, man, it's exactly the story I want to tell, but man, I really wish I could have maybe put 5 issues here and 5 issues in between here. Which for everyone listening, if you're not familiar with comic books, that's about tens of $1,000s to do that. So it's hard because you have to balance out telling a complete story with what is feasible, budget wise and time wise. I think everyone is also under the impression when you go to your LCS that this is easy to do. I mean, I would say one comic book can easily take 7 to 8 months.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a reasonable time frame to give anyone. So this is a project when you undertake. I think sometimes it's hard to go to an indie booth and realize, oh, they only have 10 issues out. Those 10 issues, they might have started when they're 25 and now they're maybe 29 or 30 and they finally have it done to present it to you. It's a lot of your heart and soul kind of going into this.
Yeah, I was actually, so I wrote the first 2 issues before I went to the LA Con, and I was walking around talking to all the indie writers and creators, and you know, a lot of them had 2 issues out there, and I had 2 issues within my first, I would say, year. And so 6 months is like right on the dot. It takes time to write it. It takes time to get the art. It takes time to print. It takes time to edit. Sometimes you print and you realize, man, I wish I would have tweaked this a little bit, and then you print again. So it takes time. It takes time to get there.
Yeah, definitely. Now you've had a lot of experience. Obviously, you have a plan for this arc and continuing it. Having written kind of this dark, almost neo-noir kind of detective story with your own heart and soul into it, if you were to write another book, do you think you'd take a break from that style just to kind of expand your horizon? Or is this just like the genre just sticks with you, that kind of that crime fighting, save the day kind of theme?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the original kind of lesson is you write what you want to read. And this is the stuff I just enjoy reading more than anything. And there are many ways to take it. You know, you can add a little more superhero powery kind of like mysticism to it. So there's a lot of angles you could take it where you know, you can kind of extend it out a little bit. But this is what I love to write, and I'm not going to close the door on it, but I don't think it's something I'm really going to target towards.
Definitely. If for some reason you were asked to collaborate on a project or something, is there another genre though that you think you would be interested in, or you just like maybe horror you would want to see more of, or more of like a whimsical or high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings? Is there any type of project like that that would be like kind of a second choice for you?
I think the second choice would be more historical.
Okay.
I love history, and I particularly love like World War II era
Yes.
history, and doing stuff, whether it be like just kind of stories where you have to do your research, but at the same time you put some kind of twist to it where it makes it more fun and enjoyable to read. I think that would be something that would be a lot of fun to work on with someone.
Yeah, no, you are not wrong. One of the people we had, God, I wish I could remember. I think Mad Cave that they're with. They're doing Kosher Mafia, and they're telling the story of how the Jewish community helped World War II. And he said this is just so much fun because there's so many facts, there's so many crazy stories. History is always weirder than fiction. That thing rings out true. So definitely history would be fantastic. Just the Philippines itself, I could think of so many stories that I've heard at work. The amount of books you could do on that are almost endless.
Yeah, and just the cultural mysticism alone,
Yeah.
right? I think you could really kind of take it in so many different directions. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess like I said, I'm not going to close the door on anything, and maybe something will just spark my interest, and I'll have to kind of pull that thread. But as of right now, this is kind of, I don't want to say I'm comfortable with it, but it's just a lot of fun still.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of hit while the iron is hot. You have such a great, like I said, a great setup and a great run going, and you still have so much story to tell. Now with these books, and you got a lot coming out, in being self-published, I've always kind of wondered, Is this something you would want to keep it as singles, or at the end of this run, have you thought about, as you had posed a graphic novel question in the beginning, doing a hardcover collection for a book like this?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So I definitely want to go trade paperback at some point, and put in a bunch of sketch art in there as well, and
Definitely.
just various things that I worked on with collaborators to throw just what they're good at in there as well. And so something that's kind of larger like that, where fans can just kind of take the whole storyline, the whole arc, and just take that home and read it without having to get individuals. I think you can give them a lot of like really special pieces to that they wouldn't get otherwise.
Definitely. Now, obviously, here in America, we have LCSs. Depending on what state you're in, depending on what county you're in, you could have either 5 within a 10-mile radius or 1 within a 50-mile radius. But I do know, again, back in the Philippines, that getting some media is very difficult. But being that you're self-published and how much comic books are on the rise there, have you thought about kind of getting like a mass collection and sending this out there to send back to the island? Just maybe even to help inspire or give that story out to the people that inspired you to write it.
I haven't. It's a really great idea. I know other Filipino creators that do that.
Yeah,
And so there's, and we have a lot of family out there, of course, so it wouldn't be something that is unreasonable to do. I just haven't thought of it yet. So yeah, maybe I'll chat with my wife and we can investigate that a little bit.
perfect. I'm here for all the ideas you need.
Yeah.
So that being said, what issues do we have out right now?
Yeah. So issue 1 is pulling the string, or who's pulling the strings. So that's the one that we've been referring to throughout most of the show. Issue 2 is tightening the strings. So that one is that one came out shortly after, probably within 6 months after part 1. Part 3, trapped in the strings, really just a fun book. And then so that one's out there, and then the last one that just came out was cutting the strings. So obviously there's a theme there. It's all part of the Light and the Dark series. So there's 4 books self-published out there right now that you can buy, and then I'm working on the 5th one right now, which is going to be called Into the Dark.
Awesome. For everyone listening and they want to get their hands on a copy of this, where is the best place to buy it?
Yeah, so if you hit up my Instagram, Lani Comics, I think we'll probably put it in like the show notes or something.
Yep.
But you can go there, and there's a bunch of links there to various places you can purchase. I have an Etsy shop that I stood up, and so I sell signed prints, as well as digital right through there. I'm on Indie Planet, of course, so I sell digital and print there as well. And I just started selling digital on Heartline Comics, so they have it on there now to sell. Etsy's probably the best place to grab it, and you can always just reach out to me on Instagram, and we can work something out and just figure out like a way that might be better for you. So.
Definitely. And now you said you are coming to a convention soon. What is that convention? Where can people find you if they're in the area?
Yeah, so it's called San Diego Comic Fest. It's October 26th and 27th. Up in Carlsbad. You're probably not, if you're not familiar with San Diego, that's probably it's probably gibberish to you, but Carlsbad is in northern San Diego, and it's ran by a really great group of people out here that really care about comics, care about the community, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about it, and it's again my first con that I'll have a booth in, so just kind of working out all the details of what that table will look like.
Definitely. All right. Well, for everyone listening, if you are going to be in the area, come check them out. Get your comic books. For everyone that just wants to stay up to date, see what you're working on and where to find you, where Instagram obviously is the best place to find you. What is that handle?
Lani Comics, and Instagram is the only social I use. So you can see all like new sketch work there, new ink work, all the up to date news and things like that. Right now, I actually do have a special on Etsy. Everything's 20% off for a limited time, so you can pick up your books there. And so, but Instagram is definitely the best place, and I'm on it quite a bit, so you can always DM me.
Awesome. Well, everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed. Go check them out on Instagram. Go get your hands on Lani. You're going to enjoy it. We definitely endorse it. Evan, thank you for coming on. Thank you for answering our questions. Hopefully we'll have you on in the future and we can keep discussing where you go with this project, and we look forward to watching everything grow.
Ryan, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
No problem. Everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed. You can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe and like. And we hope you enjoy the next episode. Everyone listening, have a good night.